The string light swayed gently above the garden, casting a warm golden glow over the white tablecloths and glassware. Wine-flowed laughter rippled, and the whole scene looked like something off Elena's Instagram feed. Curated, filtered, flawless. I sat at the far end of the table, next to the outdoor heater, where no one could hear. Leo asked me if he could have a second roll. I passed him one, quietly gave him a napkin, and smoothed his curls with a practiced hand. I was here out of obligation, not belonging. Elna stood at the head of the table in a backless silk dress, clutching her champagne flute like it was part of her brand. Before dessert, she called, her voice cutting through the clinking silverware. "I want to make a quick toast," I braced myself, "to love, commitment, and building a future, not just content." She laughed, the room joining in as if they understood an inside joke. Then her eyes locked on mine. "And to my cousin Jade," she said sweetly, "who reminds us that sometimes it's okay to take a little longer, finding your forever. Or just go solo with a souvenir." My heart dropped. The table erupted with laughter. Real laughter, loud, careless, cruel. Uncle Victor slapped the table, wheezing. "Used goods don't resell easy," he added, chuckling through his glass of Cabernet. Even my mother Angela tried to mask a smile behind her wine glass. I watched her reach for the bottle, avoiding my eyes. A small, complicit silence. I felt heat rise up my neck, my ears burning. Leo was distracted by the garden lights, thankfully oblivious. I held onto my fork like a tether, fingers digging into the linen napkin on my lap. They all saw me, but not really. Just the version of me they'd decided on, the single mom who never quite made it, the one who should have been grateful just to be invited. Then it happened. Micah, Elena's fiancé, stood slowly. He didn't raise his glass, didn't smile. He just walked quiet and deliberate past the centerpieces and linen-covered chairs toward my side of the table. The laughter died down like a speaker's volume had been turned down. Everyone watched. Micah stopped beside me and looked at Elena. That wasn't funny. She blinked, confused lips still parted from her last laugh. "She's a better human than anyone here," he said, calm but loud enough for the whole table. "And I think you all need to remember that." Silence, heavy. No one moved, not even the servers. For the first time in years, I didn't shrink. I sat taller, steadier, because someone had finally seen me. Not as a punchline, but as a person, and that changed everything. People always say I'm strong, like it's a compliment. But strength for me was never a choice. It was survival, a daily grinding requirement. After Leo's father left, no explanation, no warning, just a 2-line text and radio silence. I learned to hold everything together with sheer will and duct tape. Freelance gigs by day, lattes by night. Graphic design for small businesses. Barista shifts on the weekends. Diapers, doctor's appointments. Late night crying that wasn't just the babies, all handled solo without applause. There were no baby showers, no welcome baskets, no casseroles in the fridge, just me standing in a dark kitchen, learning how to heat formula with one arm and edit logos with the other. And my family. They didn't shame me openly, that would have required effort. They opted for silence. Thin-lipped smiles at holidays, whispered comments I was never quite supposed to hear. I remember showing up to Easter dinner with Leo, in a sling, sleep-deprived and desperate for warmth. Elna offered to take a selfie with me, said, "Let's show them how resilient you look." That was her word. Resilient. I smiled for the camera. But later that night, I cried on the bathroom floor, while Leo slept beside the toilet on a folded towel. Still, I showed up, every time. Birthdays, family cookouts, Christmas Eve dinners, where Elena unwrapped designer gifts from her sponsors and I gave out homemade jam. I knew my place, the footnote, the cautionary tale. Don't end up like Jade Aunt Denise once whispered, thinking I couldn't hear. And yet I came to the engagement dinner. I brought a gift, a personalized cheese board hand-burned with Elena and Micah's names. Took me 3 hours to finish between design deadlines. I made sure Leo was dressed neatly, shoes wiped, manners rehearsed. I curled my hair, smiled at people who didn't remember the last time they asked how I was. Why? Because I didn't want to be bitter. Because some part of me still hoped to be seen. Because I've always been taught to keep the peace, even if it meant swallowing myself whole. When Elena's toast came, it wasn't just a jab, it was a scalpel. She carved into years of built-up silence and exposed the truth: I wasn't respected. I was tolerated, expected to sit at the edge of the table, laugh at their jokes, and never ask for more. But that moment, that smirk, that punchline at my expense, did something to me. It didn't just hurt, it rewrote the rules. Because maybe I had been quiet too long. Maybe dignity wasn't about enduring, but about deciding where the line is drawn. And I was done letting them draw it for me. The engagement dinner wasn't the beginning, not by a long shot. Elena has always known exactly how to make her cruelty look like kindness. That's her gift, or maybe her brand. Subtle curated digs wrapped in hashtags and honeyed tones. Never loud, never crude. Just enough to sting, and just vague enough to deny. Jade's always been earthy, she once said, during a family game night. Like the type who'd grow kale on a windowsill and name her kid after a tree. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because what was I supposed to do? Correct her, say my son's name is Leo, not some tree. Say that yes, I buy second-hand clothes and pack almond butter sandwiches. Because I have to, not because I'm trying to win some invisible moral prize. At Aunt Denise's baby shower, Elena handed me a gift bag and said, "Thought you could use some you-time essentials." It's hard being a forever single mom. Right inside was a sheet mask and a bottle of wine labeled "Mommy Needs a Break." Everyone giggled. I smiled, said thank you. Later, I poured the wine down the sink. Every holiday, every reunion, there was something. You still living in that duplex near South Lamar. Still freelancing, huh? Must be nice not having a real boss. Oh, is Leo's dad still not in the picture? That's rough. No one ever stepped in. They thought it was just teasing. Elena was the golden girl, the influencer, the one with thousands of followers and perfect lighting in every selfie. She didn't have to say she was better. Everyone just assumed it. And I stayed silent. Not because I believed her, but because I was tired. Because starting a fight meant creating another story. Jade, the jealous cousin Jade, can't take a joke. I convinced myself that swallowing it was strength, that shrinking was survival. But it wore on me, like water on stone. I started to see how much I'd adapted, how I dressed differently around her, how I avoided speaking too much at family dinners so she wouldn't twist my words. I even second-guessed my social media posts, wondering if they seemed sad or pathetic compared to hers. The night before the engagement party, I almost didn't go. I sat in bed holding the RSVP card. Leo was asleep beside me, one arm thrown over my stomach, his mouth slightly open in a deep dream. I looked at his face, safe, soft, unburdened, and thought, if I don't go, she wins. But part of me knew Elena had already crossed too many lines. That dinner wasn't going to be another passive-aggressive soiree. It was going to be the last time I let her write my story. The laughter didn't stop right away. even after Micah stood, even after the words left Elena's mouth and hung in the air like smoke. People chuckled nervously, unsure if they were still supposed to be amused. I sat frozen in my chair, eyes locked on my untouched plate. The garden lights above swayed gently, but everything in me was still. My face burned, not just with embarrassment, but betrayal. I didn't need applause. I didn't even come looking for warmth. But I never imagined my own family, my mother would sit silent while I was torn apart like that. I turned to her almost reflexively, searching for something. Her eyes darted away. She looked at her napkin, adjusted her bracelet. That was the moment, the real moment. Not Elena's toast, not Uncle Victor's cruel joke. Angela Moreno's silence. The woman who raised me, who knew how hard I'd fought to keep our lives stitched together, didn't even flinch when they reduced me to a punchline. She didn't speak because deep down she believed it, or didn't think it was worth disrupting the night. I clenched my hands in my lap nails, pressing into my palms. Every part of me wanted to disappear, to grab Leo and walk out, to cry in the car until my throat gave out, to scream and call Elena every name she deserved. But I didn't move. I stared at the linen napkin, took a deep breath, focused on the sound of the wind in the trees and the hum of cicadas in the distance. Micah's voice echoed in my ears, louder than any of the laughter had been. She's a better human than anyone here. I didn't even know he had seen me. Not really. We'd spoken maybe a handful of times, but somehow in the quiet of his own observation, he had seen the weight I carried, the dignity I held onto, the resilience I never flaunted. And he stood up for it, for me. That small act split something open inside me. Not rage, not shame, clarity. I didn't belong at this table, not because I was less than them, but because I had outgrown them, outgrown their smallness, their need to belittle others to feel big, their definitions of worth that began and ended with perfect timelines and filtered smiles. That night didn't break me, it clarified me. I would not be their scapegoat anymore. I would not sit silently while they tore me down to build their image up. I wouldn't lash out that would make me the spectacle they craved. But I wouldn't stay invisible either. Something had shifted, and it wasn't going back. Micah didn't return to his seat. He stood there silent and steady, the entire garden dinner watching him like they were waiting for a punchline. But none came, only truth. I met Jade a few years ago, he said calmly, his eyes not on Elena, but on the rest of the table. At a nonprofit fundraiser, actually. I was going through a rough patch, burned out post-layoff drinking, more than I should have, barely sleeping. Most people at that event didn't see me. She did. I sat frozen, barely breathing. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't even remembered that night in detail. Just that he looked tired, and I offered to walk him to his car when he left early. She talked to me like I wasn't a disappointment, Micah continued. Didn't ask for anything, didn't expect anything, she just listened. Elena's expression hardened. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. And you all, he gestured around the table, you think you know her because she doesn't clap back, because she shows up quiet and respectful, even when she's treated like she doesn't belong. He turned to Uncle Victor. You called her used goods. Is that what we've become, a family that laughs at survival stories and applauds influencers but ignores integrity? No one answered. Even the cicadas seemed to go quiet. Micah finally looked at Elena. Not angry, just disappointed. You want a wedding built on love and celebration. Start by not humiliating the people who show up for you. He turned and sat beside me, His hand brushed the table near mine, not quite a touch, but a signal. You're not alone. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just exhaled for the first time all night. And in that breath, something in me anchored. Micah didn't humiliate Elena. He didn't tear her down. He simply told the truth, gently, firmly. And that truth had more power than any insult ever could. After dessert was served, I stood quietly and gathered Leo from the kids' table. No announcement, no drama, just motion. As I moved through the garden, I caught glimpses. Some people looked down, others looked away. A few, like Aunt Denise, had the decency to look embarrassed. But no one said a word. I paused near my mother. She wouldn't meet my eyes. And that was the final seal. Outside under the Texas night sky, I buckled Leo into his booster seat. He asked if we were going home. I said yes. But the truth was bigger than that. I was going forward. Not with revenge, not with vengeance, but with every ounce of dignity they tried to strip from me and failed. The garden had never been so quiet. As I stepped forward, Leo holding my hand, the clinking of cutlery had stopped. No one laughed now. No more toasts. Just the weight of what Micah had said sitting heavy in the air. You could feel it like a tide had shifted, leaving everyone off balance. I wasn't planning on saying anything, I truly wasn't. But halfway to the exit I paused, not for them, for me. I turned slowly, eyes scanning the table. I wasn't searching for apologies. I knew better than that. I just wanted to remember this moment clearly, not through a fog of humiliation, but through a lens of clarity. Elena. I said, my voice calm, thank you for showing me exactly what this family thinks of me. She blinked, surprised that I had spoken. Her mouth opened slightly, but I didn't give her the chance to speak. I used to think I had to earn a seat here, that maybe if I tried hard enough, worked quietly enough, raised Leo well enough, I'd stop being the family's embarrassment. A few people looked away. Uncle Victor suddenly became interested in his empty glass. But the truth is, this seat. I gestured to the table. It was never worth sitting at. Elena's face hardened, but I didn't care. I wasn't here for her. I'm not ashamed of my story, I continued. I've raised my son without handouts or shortcuts. I've shown up even when it hurt, because I believed that blood meant something. But I realize now, some bonds only go skin deep. I looked at my mother. She didn't speak, didn't move, so I spoke for both of us. From now on, I'm done performing gratitude for scraps. You don't get to mock me and still call it love. Micah watched me silently, his gaze steady, proud. I turned to Leo, his hand still wrapped in mine. Ready, baby. He nodded, eyes wide but trusting, always trusting. As we walked toward the gate, I didn't look back, not even once. I didn't need to. The silence behind me said more than any apology ever could. In that moment, I wasn't the single mom. I wasn't the failure or the cautionary tale. I was a woman who had survived more than they'd ever understand, and still stood tall enough to walk away without raising her voice. Because sometimes the greatest confrontation isn't in the shouting, it's in the refusal to stay small. The next morning, the sun came through the windows of our little apartment in East Austin, soft and golden, like it had nothing to prove. Leo was still asleep, curled into his dinosaur sheets, breathing slow and deep. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, staring at the quiet. No texts, no calls, no fallout, just stillness. It felt clean. The night before had played over in my mind like a film. The garden lights, the laughter, Micah's voice, my own words finally spoken, finally heard. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter. I felt something better. Done. done waiting to be seen, done shrinking to fit their comfort, done sitting quietly while people with perfect hair and filtered smiles decided my worth. Later that week, I got a message from Micah, short, thoughtful. If you ever want to collaborate on something real, I'd love to talk. Also, Leo's a cool kid. I smiled. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't need to rush. For once, there was no need to prove myself to anyone. Instead, I took Leo to the park. We ate ice cream and ran under the spray of the splash pad fountains. I took a photo of him, mid-laugh face sticky with joy. No filters, no captions, just for me. A few days later, I began sketching a new series for my design portfolio stories, of women told through soft textures and bold lines. I titled the project Not Yours to Diminish. It went viral within a week, but that wasn't the victory. The victory was the message I got from another single mom in Dallas. You reminded me that I don't have to stay small to keep peace. Thank you. And I realized for the first time in years that my story wasn't a tragedy. It wasn't even a comeback. It was a beginning, no longer defined by Elena's shade or my mother's silence, but by the way I chose to walk through it with grace, with truth, and with my son's hand in mine. They don't get to write the story anymore. I do, and I've never felt more ready to tell it.